was a staff sergeant, a medic, so I wasn't going to be the one to break that chain. I would have a front row seat watching history unfold. I wanted to see what would happen when I got in combat. You know, would I pee my pants? Would I run the other way? Would I run with the troops toward the bang-bang? So I went down to Scranton and raised my right hand and went to Fort Dix for basic training. I was given this magic press card, which it was remarkable in that it gave me the ability to travel all over Vietnam endlessly. I thought maybe when I started to go out in the field with the infantry that there would be some resentment because I didn't have to be there. I had chosen to be there. It was just the opposite. It was, man, are you out of your mind? You didn't have to be here. Why are you with us? I said, I think what you're doing is important. I want to document it. I called it the first and last rock and roll war. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you got it. They had long hair and beards, and they wore headbands and anti-war armbands. And once we went on a combat assault, and all of a sudden the pilot got ready. I could see he was going to dive. And when the guy dove and planned to splatter the enemy, Happiness is a Warm Gun was blaring through our earphones. And that was just the weirdness of it. There were pallets of Budweiser being flown all over the country. Helicopter pilots would bring along big blocks of ice, and they were trading ice-cold beer for war trophies. AK-47 was coveted. The troops got to roll the beer cans on the ice and have, ice-cold beer in the middle of Cambodia where it's 110 degrees. Here's a shot where we were being attacked. And here are the guys reloading because they know they're coming again. This guy's smoking a cigarette and drinking a Budweiser, which Vietnam was the only war you would have seen that. You can use the camera as a shield. I'd used it as a shield in Vietnam. A lot of people have. And I wanted to show the true horror of war, so I decided to do something which at the time seemed to make sense. I decided for a month or two to fly nothing but dust off, nothing but medevacs, because every day you saw the results of war, dead and horribly wounded. It later turned out that it was devastating. And this one is the one that later on really got me. You can't see it much because he had stepped on a mine and was cut in half. There's nothing from the waist on down. And the door gunners said, we're going to clean out the slick, what they were calling hamburger, if it was all in it and it was all over me. They said, want us to hose you down, and they did. And what's weird about that experience that day, I flew back into Saigon, went to the hotel and had my cognac and soda, and it didn't affect me. It wasn't registering. And that was the numbness I felt in Vietnam. There's something called dissociation. When you disassociate, you forget big chunks of what went on. Or you remember it, but it's like happening to someone else. 40 years later, it affected me to a degree that was horrific. The Vietnam photo book was the first book and one of the only books published by somebody who was in the Army. New York Times, they put a full-page ad that said, "Smile, you're in Vietnam," and it started getting glowing reviews. And after the Vietnam photo book and everything else, I had a career, a full-blown career as a photojournalist. I remember Doc Klein, our family doctor, said to me, "Something happened to you in Vietnam. You're a different person." I said, "Yeah, Doc, I got to experience combat, I got to have a front row to history, and I got a career." He said, No, Mark, I'm meaning something bad. Something bad happened to you. You don't remember these things, but somehow I got from Philadelphia to here smashed the garage. Now, things have to change, and if this isn't a wake-up call, I don't know what is. But there's been a whole hell of a lot of wake-up calls. I've talked to my wife about this. She said, you didn't always drink like this. During the 70s, 80s, when you're doing all these projects, it wasn't impairing what you were able to do because the work was accepted as something important. Gramp was a bestseller. I think there was 8 foreign editions. The reviews were published in hundreds of newspapers, magazines, and that became a film called Chili Smith Farm, a documentary that was shown on the Discovery Channel many times and on PBS. After Gramp was so successful, I could have done anything. I had been working on an essay about leisure, and then I decided it could be expanded into a book. This is the world's largest frying pan. The crab marriage on the beach. Here's the guy with the UFO motorcycle. The film was so far ahead of its time, and it either repelled people or it changed their life and they became something else. We were dealing with liberation through excess. Mardi Gras, Naked City, and then once it went to Fakir, it had a total spiritual outlook because Fakir was a shaman, and hanging from the cottonwood tree in Wyoming took it into a spiritual dimension where Fakir, I believe, did go out of his body and meet his maker.
He always had the PTSD, not necessarily late onset, but what we would see as late onset of the symptoms.
I've often said that since I was 35 years old, I haven't enjoyed a drink the way normal people enjoy a drink. It was always to self-medicate or to blot things out.
The fact of the matter is Mark was a play hard, work hard kind of guy, and that's another characteristic, is this overworking, working, trying to avoid. But his symptoms became problematic as life progressed for him and the alcohol intake progressed for him.
I started to exhibit all the classic signs of an alcoholic. I would just drink around the clock. I've been blacking out for years, as it's not uncommon with heavy drinkers. You just fall, and at times you don't remember the falling. You either wake up in the ER because you're unconscious. Sometimes I'd be gone for 3 or 4 days and not remember any of it.
Mark's alcohol use is very common with those with PTSD. That numbing, that feeling that you just want to take away all that pain, all that noise going on.
My brain is back in the hamster cage. Spinning. Won't stop.
The core things that happen in PTSD, re-experiencing the event. It's almost like having the old recorders where you hit play, stop, rewind, play, because that's what it does in their minds, and they're reacting to it.
Jesus, did you hear? Jesus! Okay, that's why I'm back in Vietnam and Cambodia. This last 4th of July, which happens to be my birthday, I was drinking heavily, and I could just feel myself falling into madness. And then what happened, the people next to me, these assholes over here, the fireworks that was most popular was called a mortar. And they drop it down a mortar tube, and it sounds exactly like a real mortar round. It went on for days, and I had the worst flashback I have ever had. I thought I was actually back in Cambodia. And at one point when the mortars wouldn't stop, I ran back to this tree line here. It was covered with foliage at the time, and I remember huddling down in that tree line there saying, "Where are our mortars? Where are our jets?" Thinking that I was absolutely in Cambodia. That's the first time I had really experienced it to that degree.
As far as the Vietnam veterans, their experience was so different. For years, PTSD wasn't even thought of. There wasn't even a word for describing what was happening. So the Vietnam veterans, I believe, they really were at a disadvantage when it came to treatment.
When Vietnam caught up with me, I spent the last 2 years in VA institutions, involuntary holds, 6 rehabs, suicide attempts.
Mark had very significant suicidal ideation, meaning that he had serious suicidal thoughts. He was not safe in his head.
I'm still fixated on hanging.
My treatment with him was 100% crisis-oriented, safety planning.
Something happened in that 4 or 5 days of absolute madness in my brain that has had a profound effect. It took a long while, year and a half, for things to start to stabilize.
I think now he recognizes what phase of his disorder that he's in and what he needs to do, and that's a part of recovery as well.
There comes a time in your life where you're sober so that you can make rational decisions and you just realize it's time to change your life. There's nothing more wonderful than the sensation of pain going away.